Hi, and welcome to week 2. This week we're focusing in on skinning and binding skin, which sounds kind of weird, but it's basically making our mesh move with our skeleton and our joint setup. A lot of times we make sure to get the skeleton down perfectly so that when we get to this point it's a little bit easier. So if you do have any questions on your skeleton, or if something isn't quite in the right spot or isn't working well, you do not want to move forward with binding the skin because you'll have to undo it all when it comes time to changing your rig. So I simplified this again a little bit. You can see I've got the main joint set up. I just don't have the fingers here. All of it will be applied the same exact way. I just want you to see it on kind of a easier level to break it down. Okay, so this week again is on skinning. You have a discussion on anticipation. Anticipation, I just want to clarify really quickly. A lot of people say, if I'm going to get punched in the face, I'm anticipating that punch. So I might put my hands up or I might be scared. That's a little bit different than anticipation in animation. Anticipation is the action before the action. So if I was going to throw a football or punch, the anticipation is pulling my arm back to then do my action. After the action, you're going to have follow through. So it's kind of a three-step process. So anticipation, action, follow through. And we really do this with anything. You can't get momentum without pulling back. Think if I just held a ball in front of my face and went forward, it would just be like a type thing, whereas if I really swing back, I can chuck it a lot further. Okay, and then we have our skinning assignment. You have to click into it and then click again, but basically I'm looking, did you bind it? How did you set up the weighting? And is there any visual blemishing? Visual blemishing is if I were to move something and something gets left behind. I'll show you. Weighting is assigning vertices to go along with joints, and binding is putting the skin to the skeleton. There is a video posted inside the module. He's going to go over painting weights. Painting weights is a great and very common way of doing things. I will also take a look at the component editor. It's a little bit more mathematical. Both work the exact same way. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, so to bind my skin, basically I'm going to take my joint chain, which starts with spine. I'm going to hold Shift and click in the viewport, or Control and then click in my outliner so that I've got the spine as well. And then we're going to go to skin. There's a couple of options here. Bind skin is the most commonly used. Interactive bind skin brings up these capsules that allows you to kind of set things. But again, for this we're just going to use bind skin. Hit the option box. Now I'm doing my entire joint chain, so bind to joint hierarchy. You'll see in the video he does selected joints, so make sure to pick which one works best for you. I'm going to leave all these the same. You'll see that you can kind of do dual, so you can do dual or classic linear. Now, max influences is how many joints do you want to be able to affect a certain vertice. 5 is just a lot. We can bring it down to 4. 4 is still a lot, but sometimes it's necessary. So if we're looking at, let's say, this vertice right here, we want to know how many joints can be affecting the movement of this one. So is it the shoulder, the neck, the spine, etc. Okay, and then you can hit bind skin. You want to check how it works. So we can grab our controller and we can bend. So you can see how this is affecting different things. When I am moving my arm down, you'll see that my rib cage is actually moving. Now you may want a slight movement, but you definitely don't want this to cave in anytime you move your arm. I would only recommend more kind of in the armpit. So this is where we get into painting weights, or the component editor, and why it was so important that you labeled your joints. Okay, so what we can do is right mouse, click, and hold. Make sure you're actually on your mesh here. And go into vertex. And you can see it's colored. That's one of the options that we selected. But I'm going to click and drag over some of my vertices. And we're going to look over in here. And sometimes when you click and drag, you're selecting part of your skeleton, and that's why it's not really picking these for me. Would help if it was not in reference. There we go. So I selected my row of vertices. I'm going to go to Window, General Editors, and then Component Editor. And then we're going to have to see all these tabs up here. We can go to Smooth Skins. Okay, now this may seem like a lot. Here, maybe to simplify it, I'll just grab a few vertices. Now, I know that I want this part of the mesh to only be affected by my spine joint. So you can see I've got spine right here, left shoulder, left arm roll, and left arm. And this is telling you out of a total of 1, the percentage breakdown of what is causing this to move. Okay, so I only want it to be affected by the spine, so I can click and drag down and then type 1 and hit enter, and now you can see 100% of this goes to the spine. Now let's say, well, I want to make it go to something else and I don't see any options here. You can go to Options and uncheck Hide 0 columns, and then it will show all of your joints. Okay, so just for the time being, I'm going to use my actual Now, I'm breaking this a little bit because I've set up the IK, but I'm moving it, and I want you to see, if you look down here, I am moving my left shoulder joint, and you can see these vertices right here that I weighted to the spine aren't moving because I'm not actually moving my spine joint. Now, if I click on my spine joint and I move that, you can see this is all going with it. Now, by default, because Maya is pretty smart to start out with, it knows that this whole area should kind of go with the spine, so that's why nothing is being left behind. And it's important to see that. So if I grab this, I'm going to click my left arm controller so that I've got both of them. It's important to look and just check to make sure that there isn't any information that's left behind, because sometimes you'll see that a vertice just shoots out because it doesn't know what joint it's supposed to be connected to, so it kind of gets left behind. So visual blemishing and getting left behind. Let me show you what that would look like. Let me go into vertex mode, and let's, for example, I'm just going to grab these two. I'll go into my component editor, smooth skins. Let's just say this didn't have any weighting. I don't know if it's going to let me break it, but we'll try. Or how about I'll just put it all to my left hand. Okay, so when it's talking about visual blemishing, this is what I am looking for. You should be able to move your controller here without having any weird vertice. So this is what you're looking to correct, and a lot of time you can just move your rig into weird positions to see what happens. So now, when you're dealing with, and let me just make this transparent so we can see a little bit. When you're dealing with your joints, it's kind of easy to know, okay, well, here's the actual joint, my left forearm, aka like my elbow, that you're going to want this entire row to be 100%. Makes sense. Then when we go back here, you're going to want this entire row to be 100%. So what do we do in the center? You can very easily just grab the direct center and do it a 50-50, and then we're kind of dealing with fall off in between. So weighting can become a little tedious, but just play some music. It's kind of relaxing. So we can go into vertex mode. Let's say we want this. I'm going to hide my joints temporarily so I can select this freely. And of course you'll want to check multiple angles to make sure you've got the joints that you think you do. Looks good. So then I'll bring back my joints. You can kind of hide to make sure you see what you're dealing with. All right, and then you can either paint weights, and again, that's explained in the other video, or you can go into the component editor. Neither, both ways work. It's just what you find works for you. I'm going to hide the 0 columns because I don't really need to deal with them. And then you can see this is being weighted to 4 different ones right here. So that's why we were kind of getting some weird wiggly movement, because we don't want it to be all that way. Okay? So, do I think this should be affected all the way by the left arm? No. And it has small weightings here, but, and again, make sure to click all the way down. So I just click and drag, and then 0 for the whole column. Do you think it should go for the left arm roll, the left forearm roll? Again, 0 out. And it's going to be a little bit of back and forth and seeing what works best. But again, you can just start by knowing, let's do 0 here, 100% there. So then you take a look at what that looks like with your arm, what you're getting. I still have that blemishing on here, so make sure you can go into vertex. And we only want it to go to the spine. There we go, and then we've cleaned that up. All right, so you'll go through and clean that up, and you should make sure your skeleton should already be set so that when you're using this controller, your arm is bending naturally. So if you're not getting the right rotation or anything like that, make sure to email me or let me know, and we can go over it. All right, so I hope you guys have a good week, and let me know if you have any questions.